Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're taking on something pretty fundamental. It's less about the Big Bang moment, the start of it all, and more about what's happening right now, like this very second.
Yeah.
And the next one.
Every single millisecond.
Yeah, exactly. Our sources today get into this, well, really massive question in theology. Who actually controls existence itself?
And it's not just control in the sense of ruling over things.
Right, it's deeper. It's about the moment-to-moment maintenance of reality. The sources lay out this incredibly detailed, systematic answer.
They really do. It's a singular, all-encompassing view of divine sovereignty. The basic assertion is that everything, and I mean everything, visible, invisible, you name it.
Good or bad?
Good or adversary,
Yeah.
None of it has independent existence or can act on its own. It's all continually owned, sustained, and governed solely by God.
Wow.
So our mission today, our deep dive, is really to unpack that vision. If you thought sovereignty was just about God being in charge, well, this view asks you to rethink the basic physics of reality.
That's a huge perspective shift. Thinking of reality needing this constant upkeep, like a perpetual decree, just holding it all together, it changes everything.
It absolutely does.
Okay, so we need a plan. We have to start the foundation, right? This idea of ownership.
The absolute foundation.
We'll explore this, frankly, radical claim that God owns it all, even non-existence itself, which is mind-bending.
It is. We'll need to unpack that carefully.
Then we'll get into the mechanics.
Yeah.
How does this work with space-time? How is governance handled? This whole angel heaven command structure.
Right, the operational side of sovereignty.
And finally, we have to tackle the really tough part. Sovereignty over adversaries. Satan, evil spirits.
Wow.
How does that fit? And what's the ultimate point? The purpose behind all this absolute authority.
Love and glory according to the sources. That's where it ultimately leads.
Okay, let's start with ownership. Absolute ownership.
Right, so the core thesis, the absolute bedrock of this whole system in our source material, is this assertion God owns everything, period.
Okay, everything existing, that part feels intuitive, maybe. If God created it, it's his.
Well, yes, the sources definitely cover that. They point to passages talking about the heavens, the earth, all its fullness, wealth, honor, power, majesty. It's all God's property because he made it.
It's First Chronicles or Deuteronomy mentioned.
Exactly, that's the baseline. But then they push it further. It's not just existence that belongs to God.
It's the non-existence thing again. Okay, help me wrap my head around owning non-existence. It sounds like owning nothing. Or maybe a concept God isn't even concerned with.
Right, it sounds paradoxical, but it's actually the linchpin that makes this sovereignty truly absolute. The sources don't see non-existence as some void outside God's control.
So it's part of his domain.
Precisely. Think of it more like the raw potential for existence or the state before existence, and God controls the switch.
The switch.
Yeah. If God calls, that non-existence flips, it becomes existence.
Yeah.
Instantly. If God turns away or withdraws that call,
Existence becomes non-existence again.
it reverts. It goes back to that God-controlled state.
Okay, so non-existence isn't just an absence, it's a managed state. A status God administers.
You got it. And that has huge implications. It means nothing can just spontaneously become. No creature, no entity can just bootstrap itself into being by chance or its own power.
It needs that active call from God.
It requires it. Otherwise, you'd have some kind of generative power operating independently of God, right? And the sources completely reject that possibility.
And the flip side,
Right.
if existence can just poof back into non-existence if God stops sustaining it.
Like Psalm 104 suggests, making the wicked be no more, it reinforces that mechanism. Nothing exists on its own, separate from God's continuous will.
This really draws a sharp line, doesn't it, between God's existence and everything else's.
A fundamental distinction, self-existence versus contingent existence. That's the absolute cornerstone.
Contingent meaning
Or dependent.
totally dependent, perpetually dependent on that divine call or sustaining act. The sources hammer this home with God's unique self-declaration, I am, W-H-I am. Exodus 3.14, the statement of pure being.
Exactly. God simply is. No preconditions, no external support needed. Everything else, angels, humans, stars, energy, even abstract concepts, is contingent.
It only exists because the self-existent I am wills it to right now, this very moment.
Moment by moment, that's key.
I think that's a really crucial point for listeners to grasp. We often have this image of God as like the cosmic clockmaker. He builds the clock, winds it up, and lets it run.
A very common image, yes.
But this view, it's totally different. It's not a clock running down. It's more like Maybe a complex simulation. That means constant processing power, a constant refresh from the operator every millisecond, or the whole thing just vanishes.
That's a really good analogy. If that system isn't perpetually preserved, actively sustained, the whole structure just collapses instantly.
Wow.
And this ongoing act, this constant upholding, is what the sources call the principle of containment.
The principle of containment. Okay, how do they spell that out?
They argue that everything created exists only within God, or perhaps by God's power. Nehemiah 9.6 is key here. It says, God made and preserves and sustains the heavens, the host of heaven, the earth, everything in it.
So the universe isn't like a separate box God made and put over there.
No, it's maintained within or by his ongoing power and will. If God were to, let's say, pause that preservation effort for even an instant.
It wouldn't just decay. It would blink out of existence, back to that managed non-existent state.
Exactly. It implies reality is contained by an ever-active, ever-present will.
So it really shifts the focus. It's not about a one-off creation event ages ago. It's about an ongoing active maintenance job right now.
If God looks away, metaphorically speaking, reality evaporates.
Yeah. That establishes ownership in the deepest possible sense, not just historically, but right now. Total active ownership.
And it covers everything. The earth, its fullness, the world, everyone dwelling in it. Psalm 24.1 says it all belongs to the Lord. There's no corner of reality, no philosophical loophole where ownership is up for grabs.
Because existence itself is conditional on God's sustaining will.
The sovereignty is complete because a being is conditional.
Okay, that's the foundation. Total ownership because of total dependence. Now let's move from that why of ownership to the how of governance. If God owns the very fabric of reality, including non-existence, how does he actually manage it all? How does that translate into running the universe, especially something like space-time itself?
Well, the source material gets remarkably specific here. It starts by confirming God built the world, constructed it, as Psalm 89 puts it, but governing it requires understanding God's relationship to space-time.
Right. How does that work?
The sources propose that God didn't just create space-time as a container for us. He created and actively sustains space-time itself. And this sustaining job is shared, interestingly, by both the first and the second Godheads.
Both. Okay, and there's this line about space-time being as if it were not there for them. What does that mean? Is it just poetry?
I think it points to transcendence. You see, we exist inside space-time. Our lives, our physics, our duration, it's all bound by its rules.
Sure. We can't just step outside it.
Exactly. But the Godhead created the framework. Think about a game developer coding a huge virtual world.
Okay.
For the characters inside that game, the world is vast, its rules are absolute. But for the developer outside the code,
It's just lines on a screen. They can change it, pause it, delete it. They're not bound by its simulated physics or distances.
precisely. The sources say the Godheads are greater than space-time. They aren't constrained by its limits, even while they're actively maintaining its operation from, let's say, a higher dimension or reality.
So the universe, even billions of light years across, is conceptually tiny from that perspective. It's a construct they're constantly managing, not some independent reality they have to navigate.
That seems to be the implication. It's a provisionally existing construct. And within that construct, they've set up a functional governance system to make sure the divine will gets done.
Right, which brings us to the command structure. The throne, the name, angel heaven. Why this specific hierarchy?
It seems to explain the link, the bridge between God's transcendent will and actual actions happening within the contingent reality of space-time.
Okay.
So God establishes his throne in the heavens. Psalm 103 says his kingdom rules over all. And the sources add layers. God places angel heaven within space-time.
Within. So angels are still inside the created framework.
That's a crucial point. Spiritual, yes, but still operating within the boundaries God created. Then God places his throne within angel heaven. And finally, he places his name on the throne.
The name on the throne. So that's like the command interface, the point where the transcendent instruction becomes an order for execution within space-time.
That's a good way to think about it. It's the mechanism. God issues commands through his name to the angels. And the angels, as Psalm 103 continues, are the ones who carry out his word, his will, within space-time.
It makes the angels purely executors then, not sources of power themselves.
Exactly. They're sustained by God, just like everything else. And this is vital. They can only act as much as he allows. Their authority, their power, it's all delegated and conditional, flowing through this specific command structure.
Okay, so if angelic power is purely delegated, what does that mean for human authority? Kings, presidents,
Yeah.
rulers.
It reinforces the exact same principle. All authority is delegated. The sources are incredibly blunt about this. Daniel 4 is emphatic. God governs human nations. He gives authority to whoever he wills.
Even, as it says, the lowest of men.
Yes, it's a constant object lesson, you could say, for everyone, human and angelic, that the Most High rules, period.
So any power a human ruler thinks they have, any independence they feel,
Yeah.
it's really just a temporary lease, granted by the ultimate sovereign.
It's exactly that, a lease. The sources stress this idea of divine appointments. A creature can't just decide to become an archangel, like Michael.
Dude mentions Michael as the archangel, yeah.
Right, it's an appointed position. Same with being a king, in the ultimate sense. It's always an appointment by God, established by his decree, maintained by his will.
And presumably revocable by his will, too.
Instantly revocable. The whole system is designed, it seems, to leave no doubt whatsoever that governance, just like existence itself, is entirely contingent on the sovereign will.
It's amazing how systematic it is. It seems to remove all chance, all randomness from the equation. Everything from planetary orbits to political shifts is routed through this divine chain of command.
The governance described is total. The structure ensures that the sovereign will is carried out, flowing seamlessly from the transcendent realm down through angel heaven, right into the nitty-gritty of earthly power and events.
The systematic control. Okay, now we arrive at the really tricky part,
Sure.
ethically and theologically. Controlling the adversary. We've established God owns everything. The list was huge. Death, life, time, space, angels, humans, angel heaven, Hades.
And crucially, Satan and evil spirits are on that list, too.
Right, all God's property. But including the adversary, Satan, in that list of things God owns and sustains, that's the ultimate test case for total sovereignty, isn't it?
It really is. If even the entity defined by opposition, the ultimate enemy, is actually owned, sustained, and governed by God, then it implies there's no truly independent threat, no cosmic equal fighting for control.
But that raises huge questions. If God is actively sustaining Satan, doesn't that make the whole conflict feel orchestrated, like a divine puppet show where evil is just playing a scripted role? Why let this powerful destructive force even exist?
That's the absolute crux of the issue, and the source material tackles it head on. It's startlingly direct. Satan is only allowed to live, it says, for a short time for a reason.
Okay, a short time for a reason. That rejects the idea of some eternal dualism, some equal battle.
Completely. It frames Satan's existence not as a challenge to God's power, but as something strategically necessary within God's plan and strictly time-limited.
So what is that reason? Why allow this temporary evil?
The sources connect it to the fulfillment of the overall divine plan. Specifically, the necessity, laid out in places like 1 Corinthians 15, for Christ to reign until he has put all enemies under his feet.
Including Satan?
Including Satan as the last enemy before death itself. So Satan's temporary permitted existence serves a purpose in the larger narrative of demonstrating God's ultimate justice, power, and the eventual complete subjugation of all opposition.
And the fact that his final end is already written.
Revelation 20, the lake of fire, yes. That predetermined fate confirms his entire existence, his influence, his duration. It's all timed and bounded by God's sovereign decree.
So the allowance isn't a sign of weakness or struggle. It's part of the architecture of divine justice playing out. It means the ultimate rebel can't actually do anything God doesn't permit.
The sources use narrative examples to drive this home. Job is the classic case, isn't it? Satan comes before God, basically asks for permission to test Job, and is given very strict boundaries.
You can do this, but not that.
Exactly. Job 1.11 shows permission being sought and limits being set. It's a stark illustration of the limit on created power, even adversarial power. And Luke 12 reinforces it. Fear the one who holds the ultimate power over life and death, body and soul. That power rests solely with God.
We need to really grasp that power difference. We tend to imagine Satan as this incredibly potent force. But in this framework of absolute sovereignty, how does his power actually stack up?
It's presented as infinitesimal, negligible. The sources use some powerful imagery. Isaiah 40, for instance. All the nations, with all their combined might, armies, wealth.
Yeah, what are they like?
Like a drop in a bucket.
Yeah.
Or like fine dust on a weighing scale so light it doesn't even affect the balance.
Wow, a drop, dust.
In fact, Isaiah goes further. God regards the nations as nothing, even less than nothing in vanity.
Just think about that. All of human history, all our empires and technologies.
Yeah.
Less than nothing compared to the sovereign God.
And this absolute authority doesn't just apply to nations collectively, it extends down to the individual creature's basic abilities.
How so?
Exodus 4, poses those rhetorical questions. Who gave humans their mouths? Who decides if someone speaks or is mute? Who determines sight or blindness?
So even our basic biological functions are endowments from the sovereign.
That's the implication. Every capacity is granted, which leads to this powerful synthesizing statement in Proverbs 16.4.
What does that say?
That the Lord has made everything for its purpose, even the wicked for the day of trouble.
Oof, that's intense.
It is, but it fits the logic perfectly. If God sustains everything, determines all capabilities, and permits all actions, including adversarial ones, then every single entity, every single event must ultimately serve the sovereign plan. Even the wicked are sustained for their role, which culminates in the day of trouble, the day of judgment.
It's the ultimate statement of, well, of everything fitting together. No loose ends, no randomness, no power outside God's control. Everything serves a predetermined purpose, willingly or unwillingly.
Whether through obedience or by being an instrument or by serving as an object of judgment, existence itself serves the plan.
Okay, we've mapped out this total unified control over everything created. Now let's get into the complexity within the source of that control, the Godhead itself. How do the sources handle the relationship between the first, second, and third Godheads while still maintaining this idea of one absolute, all-encompassing totality?
It's definitely complex, but the sources insist on what you might call a triune totality. They describe the first Godhead, the Father, the second, the Son or Christ, and the third, the Spirit, as all being the totality of everything in different ways.
How so?
Well, Ephesians 4 says the Father is above all and through all and in you all. Colossians 3 says Christ is all and in all. And Psalm 139 speaks of the Spirit's inescapable presence everywhere. So there's this fundamental omnipresence and shared sovereignty.
And the second Godhead, Christ, seems to get special emphasis regarding creation and holding things together.
Yes, very much so. Colossians 1 is central here. All things were created through him and for him, and it says in him all things hold together. He's presented as the active agent of creation and the ongoing sustainer of contingent reality.
Which underpins their co-equality.
Yeah.
Right? Philippians 2 talks about him being in the form of God, not grasping at equality.
Exactly. They share the same divine nature, the same essential authority and ownership. That's the baseline.
Okay, now for the really fascinating part, the paradox. The incarnation. The second Godhead choosing to empty himself. How does that fit with unchanging, absolute, shared sovereignty? It seems like a contradiction.
It's presented as the great mystery, the ultimate act within this framework. The second Godhead, while eternally equal in essence and nature with the first, voluntarily chose to condescend. To, as Philippians puts it, empty himself.
What does that emptying mean according to the sources? Did he become less divine?
No, not a reduction of his essential divinity. It seems to mean he voluntarily set aside the outward display or independent exercise of his divine glory and prerogatives. He chose to appear as a creature, a human being, operating within the created framework of space-time that he himself sustains.
So the infinite creator chose to live within the finite creation. That's mind-blowing. A complete reversal of that principle of containment we talked about earlier, where everything is contained in God.
It is an astonishing reversal. And this voluntary limitation is where that temporary functional hierarchy appears in the sources.
Okay. So when the sources say, like in 1 Corinthians 15, that the Father is greater than the Son during this period.
It's describing the relationship during that specific time of the incarnation, when the Son is operating as the Son of Man, under the limitations he chose to accept. It's not saying he's inherently or eternally less divine. It's about the functional roles they adopted for the plan of salvation.
So is a purposeful, temporary submission for the sake of the mission, not an essential difference in rank or being.
That seems to be exactly how the sources frame it. The structure of sovereignty allowed for this temporary adaptation to achieve the ultimate goal,
Which
reconciliation, bringing creation back into harmony with God. That same passage in 1 Corinthians 15 goes on to say that when the mission is complete, when all enemies are subdued, the Son will hand everything back over to the Father so that God, the unified Godhead, may be all in all.
Wow.
The self-emptying, the suffering, the cross. Colossians 1 says peace was made through the blood of his cross. It was all part of the sovereign strategy. A temporary adjustment in relational dynamics within the Godhead to achieve a permanent, unified sovereignty over a redeemed and reconciled creation.
We've gone through the total ownership and how the mechanics of sustaining and governing, even the incarnation. Now, the ultimate question, why? Why does God do all this? Why keep space-time running? Why sustain everything, even adversaries, moment by moment? What's the grand purpose behind this incredibly detailed, absolute sovereign control?
The source material is very clear on the why. It comes down to one core reason. God sustains and governs everything ultimately for himself, for his own glory.
For his glory. How do the sources explain that?
They point to texts like Isaiah 43, where God says he created people for his glory. The entire cosmic enterprise, this whole system of contingent existence being constantly upheld, it's all designed to ultimately reveal and magnify God's own nature, his worth, his glory.
So the universe is essentially a stage built and maintained for the purpose of displaying God's magnificence.
That seems to be the core idea, and because he is the creator and sustainer, the sources argue he is therefore inherently worthy of receiving glory, honor, and praise. Revelation 4 puts it plainly, "You are worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power."
For you created all things, and by your will they exist and were created.
Right, worthiness based on the act of creation and sustainment.
Exactly. That establishes the entitlement. But here's the crucial nuance, the twist that stops this from being purely deterministic or, well, tyrannical.
Okay, what's the nuance?
While God is absolutely entitled to love and worship because of who he is and what he's done, the sources emphasize that he does not compel it.
He doesn't force it, even though he sustains their very existence. Apparently not. Romans 10 is referenced, suggesting God holds out his hands even to a disobedient people, implying the choice to respond remains. Sovereignty here doesn't seem to extend to overriding the creature's will in response to God.
That's huge. That's the ethical center, isn't it?
Yeah.
If he controls existence itself, why make the response love, worship voluntary? Why not just program everyone for compliance?
It seems the value is in the voluntary nature of the response. Instead of compelling worship through raw power, the sources say God reveals the reasons why creatures should choose to love and worship him. The focus shifts from coercion to revelation.
Okay, so what are those revealed reasons? What does God show creatures to inspire that voluntary love and worship? It must be pretty compelling.
The reasons given are profound. They center on God's initiating love and the act of atonement. 1 John is key here. God loved us first.
Before we loved him.
Yes. And how was that love demonstrated? By sending the Son, the second Godhead, as the atonement, the sacrifice that deals with sin, that act of immense preemptive love is presented as the basis for relationship, enabling creatures to be called children of God.
So the one who holds the power of existence used that framework not just to control, but to demonstrate costly sacrificial love. That changes the dynamic entirely.
It shifts it from mere dependence to potential devotion. And that sacrifice is also the primary reason given for worship.
How so?
Because Christ's death, the blood of the covenant mentioned in Matthew 26, is presented as what achieved peace. It reconciled the broken relationship between God and creation, as Colossians 1 puts it. This ultimate act of reconciliation, performed within the sovereign plan, makes the Lamb worthy.
The Lamb who was slain. Revelation 5 talks about this, right? The specific attributes of worthiness.
Yes, very specific. Because of that sacrifice, that act of reconciliation carried out within the constraints of the incarnation, the slain lamb is declared worthy to receive 7 things: power, riches, wisdom, strength, honor, glory, and blessing.
Power, riches, wisdom, strength, honor, glory, blessing. That's comprehensive.
It is, and it represents the culmination. The entire cosmos, angels, humans, all creation, joins in worshiping the one on the throne and the Lamb. Not because they're forced automatons, but because the depth of the love and the wisdom of the sovereign plan have been so overwhelmingly revealed.
It creates this perfect loop almost. Absolute control over existence, meticulously exercised down to the smallest detail, even managing the adversary.
All deployed towards the goal of demonstrating unconditional love through sacrifice.
Which then evokes voluntary worship and brings maximum glory back to God.
Exactly. The knowledge we get from these sources really paints a picture where every single facet of reality is dependent, purposeful, and interconnected. And in the end, the only real variable left, the only point of freedom, is the creature's response to the reason God revealed for it all. The love shown in the atonement.
That response. That's the one thing absolute sovereignty chooses not to dictate.
That seems to be the profound conclusion.
Wow. That really was an extensive deep dive. We've covered the very architecture of existence and governance as laid out in these sources, from owning non-existence itself.
Right up through the mechanics of sustaining space-time, the command structure.
And into that ultimate purpose.
Yeah.
God's glory revealed through sacrificial love, leading to voluntary worship.
The sheer systematic nature of it is striking. It leaves you with this strong sense that, according to this view, absolutely nothing is accidental. No entity, not even the biggest challenge or adversary, operates outside God's permission and purpose.
Every moment is deliberate. Every existence is bounded.
Precisely.
And, that deliberate, bounded nature.
Yeah.
It brings us to a final thought for you, the listener, to consider. We established that everything created, even an adversary like Satan, is sustained by God for a specific reason and only for a limited time.
Existence itself is conditional and purposeful.
Right. So if that's true, what does that imply about the challenges, the struggles, the conflicts you face, whether personal or global? If their very existence is conditional, sustained moment by a higher will, what does that say about their ultimate power, their duration, knowing that the one sustaining them also has a purpose and sets the boundaries?
It suggests that no struggle is ultimate or eternal in itself. Its intensity, its time frame, it's all held within that larger, sovereign, sustaining will.
Yeah, definitely something profound to mull over until the next deep dive.